You know, we've seen obviously over the last year that President Trump has embedded minerals policy to become nearly synonymous with his foreign policy. We've seen minerals come up in the context of Greenland, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, Democratic Republic of Congo, so on and so forth. What's fascinating and quite different between Venezuela and Greenland is just the geology. So while Venezuela has good gold reserves, Greenland has really good rare earth deposits. And we know that rare earths have been the driver of policy here at home in the US, but also abroad, because China has restricted access to those rare earths. So Greenland has about 1.5 million tons of rare earths, and they have two of the biggest rare earth deposits in the world. And what's particularly telling for Greenland is that they have significant deposits of heavy rare earths. And remember, we have light rare earths and heavy rare earths, and China's export restrictions that have been crippling for the US and our allies have been targeted at those heavy rare earths, which even though the US is a big rare earth producer, we don't have those heavy rare earths. So that's what President Trump has had his eyes fixated on, is a potentially long-term source of rare earths. Of course, they have other minerals as well. We saw the European Union backed a graphite project that was recently permitted in December. They have deposits of lead, zinc, palladium, a number of resources, but the rare earths are really the kind of the big gold prize here.
Yeah, but really the critical question to be asking, Gracelin, and I believe that we touched on this the last time we had you on, is that it's really about the technology that goes into this, the technical expertise in rare earth processing. And do you feel like maybe over the last 12 months or so that there was a meaningful pickup on the U.S. side or some of the other U.S. allies versus China for all this to be an actual risk here?
You know, the United States has made a big play to be that technology provider, and especially with MP Materials last summer when the United States government became the biggest shareholder of MP Materials, which is developing that technology for rare earth processing. And again, we saw MP Materials has become an ally for the U.S. in our foreign policy. They are now the technology provider for the deal that was signed in November during MBS's visit from Saudi Arabia, where we would be the technology provider to develop a rare earth refinery in Saudi Arabia. But there's another challenge in Greenland that we can't understate, which is that the mining ecosystem is very nascent beyond technology. So you have the lowest population density in Greenland of any country on Earth. You all have less than 200 miles of roads that have been built. You have very limited energy infrastructure, and rare earth mining is extremely energy intensive. You have a complicated social license to operate. There's been a lot of friction between mining communities, government, and mining companies. So even though they have these fantastic rare earth deposits, there's currently no rare earth extraction. So that whole ecosystem, along with the technology, will need to be developed. So even if we go to Greenland, it's important to note that we are not going to be getting rare earths from Greenland this year or next year. It's really a long-term project development effort.
And how does this set up for some of the, I was reading about the natural gas exploration projects that are done by China and Russia. I know that this is just throwing yet another element into this very complicated web of interest. But is there a Russian angle in all this that we need to think about here to really understand the critical minerals story of Greenland?
There's a twofold narrative here when it comes to both Russia and China. One is just a security position. While the United States and Greenland have historically enjoyed a very positive security relationship, we obviously have, we enjoy access from a security perspective to the bases in Greenland. It is, when you look at Russia and where they're angling, kind of from the Arctic Circle perspective, it is a very strategic position from the United States. And I think we need to separate the long-term and short-term objectives here for the United States. I don't think there's a disillusionment here that minerals are not a short-term play when it comes to Greenland. But at a time of rising tension, obviously you have the Russia-Ukraine conflict, you have rapidly escalating tension in the Indo-Pacific between China and Taiwan. Greenland becomes, in the short term, a very strategic position for the United States, and not only enjoying access to it, but trying to keep our adversaries out of that space is the short term. The longer term play is the minerals.
Okay, so this is we got to play the long game here in Greenland. I get that, but I mean upstream, right, where it all starts, mining, exploration, etc. Talk to us about the geology there, because I mean one thing I remember is what back in the 50s, the U.S. obviously sank a heck of a lot of money into Greenland. This thing called Camp Century, which they eventually had to abandon because the geology was just too unstable. Has technology evolved to the point now where we are going to be able to extract all that stuff from under the snow and ice in Greenland, or is it going to take innovation similar to the shale revolution and fracking to come up with something?
It's a great question, Martin, and it depends on the deposit. So you're right, 80% of Greenland is under ice, which, in an industry that's already operating on razor-thin profit margins, and where our Western projects are struggling to stay commercially viable, getting through that ice is certainly a cost that many companies are not able to prepare. But the second complicating factor with geology there is that the rare earths are actually mined with uranium. And Greenland has had a very up and down policy on uranium. So because you mine them together, which is pretty common in rare earth projects globally, that rare earths are found with radioactive materials, is that Greenland actually put out a ban on mining uranium, which made it difficult, obviously, to extract the co-product of rare earths. So that is one challenge, and countries worldwide are adopting policies. This, for example, was why during MBS's state visit, the U.S. signed a nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi while they signed the rare earth deal, is because both of those are co-mined together at Jabal Sayed. Same thing in Australia, so on. So dealing with the fact that we need a stable policy on mining uranium in Greenland, but second is many of our deposits are still under ice and will require more innovation and long-term investment to figure out how to extract that more commercially viably at a time when China produces dirt cheap.
Yeah, indeed. Right. And again, it's, I think, the heavy metals that we should be focused on. Let's move a little bit further downstream and talk about the processing, right, which is equally, if not more important, in which China dominates right now globally. From Greenland or in Greenland, when you take a look at the positioning, where do you think it would make most sense to position processing, and where it could be done efficiently from a logistics point of view, as well as obviously safely?
So if you look at what's currently emerging in the processing world order for rare earths, there's kind of 4 or 5 hubs that are emerging. So Australia is one, Malaysia, where Lynas started separating and processing rare earths last year. You have Saudi Arabia, you have the United States, you have Japan. So these are some of your hubs that are emerging. The one that's going to be most logical, at least from an American perspective, is actually going to be to process them in the United States. Couple of reasons for that. First of all, we don't have deposits of heavy rare earths here in the U.S., not significant deposits. So we are building a strategy around securing them from abroad. It doesn't make sense to go get those from Australia. It doesn't make sense to get them from Saudi Arabia. But Greenland and Brazil are probably going to be the most viable bets for getting heavy rare earths back here. And we're already building our processing capabilities for heavy rare earths. Obviously, the U.S. government has invested significant, upwards of $1 billion, to develop some of these capabilities between Lynas in Texas and MP Materials in California. So that's going to be the first choice, because a place like Greenland, given the amount of technology, energy, it's not going to be commercially viable there, likely.
Yeah, talking about energy, Gracelin, I mean, with Greenland and a lot of these sites where exploration is going to start at some stage, right? Hellishly cold, isolated as well, etc. Powering these operations is, I'm curious whether you think nuclear could potentially be an option, because again, I think back to the 50s in Camp Century, right? It was for different reasons, of course. They were trying to develop mobile missile launching sites there, but there actually was a crude U.S. nuclear reactor in Greenland at one point. That's been obviously since pulled out, but.
So power is one of the biggest binding constraints. We were just looking at this today, and I mean, one of the biggest power stations in Greenland is only 54 megawatts. A lot of mines can't run on 54 megawatts as a comparison point. So you would need to have a significant energy build out to develop this ecosystem. Nuclear power is a really, really good option. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, we have to remember we're not talking about needing to distribute this power infrastructure widely. You have a very, very low population density in Greenland. So, what you really need is a reliable, low cost, ideally clean source of energy, especially given some of the frictions between environmental degradation and the communities in Greenland. You'd like it to be as clean as possible. So, nuclear stands to be probably one of the most cost efficient solutions in a place like Greenland, given these constraints.
And Gracelin, you were saying that at the start of the new year, your phone was just really blowing up with Venezuela and Greenland. And then we've got this lingering and perhaps intensifying spat between